UFC Fight Night Mexico City is less than a week away, and I'm going to give my predictions and breakdowns for every single fight on this card. We have Yair Rodriguez and Brian Ortega, a rematch that no one asked for, but I think it's going to be a fun fight, and everyone's counting out Brian Ortega for whatever reason, and not for whatever reason, I understand, but you may be mistaken. And we have the return of Brandon Moreno in another rematch that, again, no one really asked for, but will be pretty entertaining. We also have one of the most exciting prospects in the UFC making his return after a phenomenal debut against Manuel. That's Felipe dos Santos. So I'm really looking forward to that. Before we get into it, make sure to check the timestamps in the description if you guys just want to hear my take on a particular fight. And without further ado, let's get into this. The first fight on this card that I'm going to break down, Naimov versus Erik Silva. I'm going to be picking Naimov. Now, he's coming off of a win over Nathaniel Wood that is pretty damn controversial just because he cheated more times than I can count on one hand. I mean, it was pretty freaking crazy, but he has a lot of power in his hands. In both of his UFC fights, he has recorded a knockdown in each of them, right? And listen, say what you want, Nathaniel Wood still didn't really do enough. Like, he was losing because Naimov knocked him down in the first and was racking up control time. Now, of course, a lot of the control time and the takedowns came from things like glove grabs and cage grabs and whatnot. But at the same time, he was at least good enough to be able to subdue Nathaniel Wood, who's no slouch as a grappler, right? This guy also knocked out Jamie Mullarkey as well, and he's going up against Erik Silva, who is 7 years older and hasn't done anything impressive in the UFC other than beat TJ Brown, who, in my opinion, isn't that good. Like, TJ Brown, we're talking about a guy that's lost to Darren Elkins, Bill Aljo. I mean, these guys aren't slouches, but he ain't that great, bro. I'm going to be honest. TJ Brown is not that great. So I'm actually going to be picking Naimov. He has big power on the feet. He's pretty big for the featherweight division. He was kind of dwarfing Nathaniel Wood, who, to be fair, is on the smaller side of the featherweight division. But Naimov's well-rounded. He has big power, and I'm picking him to win this fight. I'm not going with Erik Silva. He's just not done enough. He's had one UFC fight, and he's beat a guy that, in my opinion, ain't that great. On to the next one, Felipe dos Santos versus Victor Altamirano. I'm going to go with Felipe dos Santos because anything else would be the dumbest thing you could ever pick. I mean, come on. Like, Felipe dos Santos is the most promising prospect in the entirety of the flyweight division. He's just too dynamic. He's too fast. He's too dynamic. He doesn't get tired on the feet. He was able to stay in there with a guy like Manuel and go to absolute war with him. Maybe Manuel won every single round, fair enough, but they were razor close outside of the rounds with a knockdown. And I have to go with Felipe dos Santos. The guy's a monster. He's 23 years old. He's got insane speed. He's got variety on the feet. His kicks are awesome. His long-rangey punches are awesome. And he could throw nonstop output for the entirety of the fight. And I think this guy is going to be an absolute cakewalk compared to Manuel, who's got really tricky footwork, who's also probably one of the fastest guys in that division, and who has big power. And, you know, listen, Victor Altamirano, I'm just going to say it, this guy looks like he could be blown away with a gust of wind. Like, he's not super skinny, but he has like a little bit of a flabby, skinny physique going on. And listen, I'm not picking this fight based on that, but I think compared to a sturdy guy like Manuel, who is a much bigger flyweight with a lot more power, who's much more dynamic, and has like the basics mastered, Victor Altamirano is a little bit of an awkward stick figure in this division, to be honest. Not stick figure, but he's kind of just an awkwardly built weakling that's not nearly as dynamic. Like, he's going to get fucked up. There's no reason to look too deeply into this fight. Felipe dos Santos is an absolute savage. He's super tough, and I think he's just going to put a vicious beating on Victor. And also, you have to think about it like this. Think about the confidence boost that he's going to take knowing how well he did against Manuel. All right? I think he's going to school Victor Altamirano, and I'm going to pick him to win by a second-round TKO with, I think, accumulative damage is going to be on his side, and eventually he's just going to get the Victor, who, you know, listen, he lost to Tim Elliott. That's no damn shame. He went to decision with him, which is pretty good. Tim Elliott's a crafty vet. And he's got like a decision win over Vinicius Salvador, who's an Andrew Tate lookalike, stick figure Andrew Tate, super awkward type of fighting as well. And then he's got a win over Daniel Lacerda, who's just not good. Daniel Lacerda is probably the worst fighter out of shoot box. And I think Felipe dos Santos is one of the best. So on to the next one. Luis Rodriguez versus Denise Bondar. I'm going to go with Denise Bondar. Now, this is a really risky pick because Denise Bondar's 0-2 in the UFC, and he's coming off of one of the most brutal finishes I've ever seen in my entire life, where he got thrown by Carlos Hernandez. I think it was a headbutt plus his head hitting the mat simultaneously that initially knocked him out, and then he took like 8 follow-up elbows while he was out cold. So that was just a nasty KO. But Denise Bondar has never been finished by TKO. Before that, he's been submitted a couple of times. He's been taken to decision. And, you know, he got beat by Malcolm Gordon, but the Malcolm Gordon fight was an absolute fluke as well. The same situations, very eerie. He gets taken down by a throw and breaks his arm, or his shoulder pops out. He's had bad luck because he was losing to Carlos Hernandez, but, you know, that was just a nasty finish that usually isn't going to happen. And Denise Bondar, in my opinion, he has like a poor man's physique fighting style. Now, he was doing a lot of showboating against Carlos Hernandez, which in my opinion was coming from a place of frustration because he was a step behind, but he was still doing well in that fight. And Carlos Hernandez, yeah, he got knocked out by Tatsuro Taira, and a lot of people clown me for saying that Tatsuro had no chance to do that to him. But at the same time, man, Tatsuro has a threat of the takedown, and, you know, he's improving. And I think that when I watched Luis Rodriguez's fights back, I think he's called like the lazy boy. I think that's his nickname. And holy shit, is it apparent in this guy's fight style. He is one of the plottiest flyweights I've ever seen in my entire life. He has a couple of finishes. One, I saw he got it started with like a flying knee, and he knocked this guy down, and he ended up TKOing him on the ground. But I just don't think he's going to knock out Denise Bondar with a big shot unless Bondar's chin is completely gone. Rodriguez has faced better competition. I'm looking at Bondar's record, and he's got a bunch of suspicious wins on there. Like, I'm talking guys that are 0-3, right? Just atrocious records. Looks very suspicious, but he's much more experienced. He looked decent against Carlos Hernandez. That's the only fight that I'm really going to count in the UFC, and I just don't think Luis Rodriguez is very good. I think this guy has, like, a low output, lazy-ass style. Bondar's got decent takedown defense, and I think that Luis Rodriguez is going to have to knock him out with a big shot. Otherwise, I don't think he's going to win. He's too stationary. He's too low output. I'm going with Denise Bondar and his poor Rafael Fiziev man style in the flyweight division. You'll see what I'm talking about. If he starts to get into his groove, he'll look a lot like Fiziev with the way he strikes. So I'm going to pick Denise Bondar to win this fight by decision. Let's get on to the next one. Claudio Puelles versus Ziam. A lot of people are going with Ziam. I'm going with Claudio Puelles. I know he just had a really embarrassing performance against Dan Hooker, and he basically pooped his pants getting hit with a bunch of front kicks to the body. But Ziam, dude, we're talking about one of the biggest, or I'm sorry, not the biggest, one of the littlest punchers in UFC history. We're talking about a guy that's going to decision with Jai Herbert. Ziam is a decision machine that's been submitted like 3 or 4 times throughout his career. That is his Achilles heel. He's been choked out a few times. He got choked out by Terrence McKinney. And I actually think that Claudio Puelles, who people forget almost submitted Dan Hooker, who's a master at getting these submissions, he's up against a guy that is worse on the feet than Dan Hooker, that's less dangerous, that's less experienced, that's got little pillow hands, little pillow kicks. And I think he's going to be able to take him down and sub him. Maybe not with a heel hook, but I think he'll take his back. And I'm going to pick him to win by submission, by rear naked choke. This is a guy that subbed Clay Guida, which is impressive. It is impressive to sub Clay Guida. He got the better of Jordan Levitt by decision. That's pretty good, man. Chris Goodersmacker, okay, you know, maybe not the most impressive win, but he still subbed him. So I'm going with Claudio Puelles. Ziam, decision merchant. I think this guy is the classic NPC pillow-handed, pillow kick guy on the feet. Little decision over Jai Herbert, right? Submitted by Terrence McKinney. Decision over Luigi Vendramini. decision over Jamie Malarkey. That's decent. He's going to be long and rangy, but so is Claudio Puelles, man. And I think those little toothpick legs of Ziam, dude, I think Claudio Puelles is going to snap him up, dude. I'm going with Claudio Puelles, dude. All right? He's getting this one done. Pathetic style on the feet. But Ziam, listen, he's going to go out there trying to body kick Claudio Puelles. I think Puelles is going to have made an adjustment. He's going to get his hands on Ziam, stick figure Ziam. He's going to take him down, and he's going to sub him straight up. This is not Dan Hooker. I know I've clowned Dan Hooker, but there's still levels. There are still levels. All right? Dan Hooker has been a finisher throughout his career. On to the next one. Edgar Chairez versus Daniel Lacerda. This is the easiest pick I've ever seen in my entire life. Dude, these guys have literally fought, and I don't care what the record says. It was a submission from Edgar Chairez. Listen, Daniel Lacerda's arm went limp. The ref shouldn't have stepped in so soon. This is basically how the fight went. Okay? Daniel Lacerda took Edgar Chairez down, but Edgar Chairez was piecing a bump at the feet. He was clearly proving to be the better guy on the feet. Edgar Chairez gets up to his feet. Daniel Lacerda goes for another takedown, and Edgar Chairez locks up like a standing guillotine. And, dude, he subbed him. Like, Daniel Lacerda was putting his thumbs up. All of a sudden, he goes absolutely limp. And listen, dude, the way that he popped out of it once the ref pulled him off, he wasn't out for long. He came back too. You could see this look on his face where he doesn't know where he is. He's so confused. The blood's coming back to his brain, dude. I'm telling you right now, he's fucked. He got subbed. He's going to get beat again. He was getting pieced up on the feet. He couldn't do anything to Edgar Chairez on the ground. Landed a couple of pitter-pat elbows. And Daniel Lacerda, this guy has 1 win. No, 0 wins in the UFC. He lost to Jeff Molina. He lost to Francisco Figueiredo. He lost to Victor Altamirano. He lost to CJ Vergara. No wins in the UFC. I don't think he's good. I don't think he's UFC caliber. And Edgar Chairez is. Edgar Chairez is a pretty good striker. And he got the submission over Daniel Lacerda. Okay? Like, you know what? Fair enough. Fair enough. It wasn't a legit sub, but he was out. He was going out. I don't care what anyone says. Just look at his reaction when the ref pulls him off. He looks so dazed, man. And then he starts complaining, dude. So there's that. Clean win for Edgar Chairez. He gets it done in the rematch. I'm going to pick him to win this one by round 1 KO. All right? I think he's going to... Usually, whenever there's like a controversial decision, the guy that's on the right side of it, meaning the one that's not getting finished and it ends in like a controversy, for example, Magomed Ankalaev and Ion Cutelaba, it always ends up good for the guy like Magomed in the rematch. It just does. It always ends up good for them, right? Look at Johnny Walker getting kneed by Magomed in their first fight and getting hurt by that. It always ends up well for Magomed in the rematch. Same thing here, all right? We saw Daniel Lacerda get wronged. Edgar Chairez is the guy on the other side of it, but it's not really his fault. It's not like it was an illegal thing. He's going to beat Daniel Lacerda up, who has done nothing but fail time and time again in the UFC. I like Edgar Chairez. He's getting it done. He was piecing Lacerda up on the feet. He's getting this shit done again. Jesus Aguilar versus Mateus Mendoca. Controversial pick. I'm going with Mateus Mendoca. Even though he has not done as well in the UFC, Jesus Aguilar's only beat absolute cans. We're talking Shannon Ross. He had a big, nasty KO over Shannon Ross. Every single guy under the sun has KO'd Shannon Ross. He has no wins in the UFC. Jesus Aguilar got dog-walked in the first round by Tatsudo Taira. He has the shortest reach in the UFC. Mateus Mendoca has a, I think, 7-inch or 6-inch reach advantage. And who is he losing to? Who is he losing to, man? He lost to Javid Basharat, went to a decision with him, actually was competitive on the feet, and he loses to Nate Maness. And Nate Maness, his record's not that good in the UFC, but he's only lost to Tagir Ulanbekov and Umar Nurmagomedov. Other than that, he's only won. Nate Maness, I think he has like 4 wins in the UFC, 2 losses to guys that are absolute studs. Come on, man. I'm picking Jesus Aguilar to get knocked the fuck out, okay? And also, Mateus is moving down a weight class. Dude, if this guy is not necessarily a small bantamweight, like he's going to absolutely dwarf Jesus Aguilar in there. Maybe the weight cut's going to be an issue, but I can't just see you knocking out Shannon Ross and say all of a sudden you have nasty power, okay? I'm going to pick Mateus Mendoca with the massive reach advantage. He has thudding power. He was even kind of stunning Javid Basharat at times, who, you know, Javid's not that great on the feet, but he's still long and rangy, and he's an annoying nuisance of a fighter to deal with up there. And I don't think that Jesus Aguilar is going to be able to out-grapple Mateus, all right? So I'm going to go with Mateus to knock out T-Rex Arms Jesus Aguilar, who, again, it's like, what has he really done in the UFC? A win over Shannon Ross and a loss to Tatsuro Taira? Are we really going to rate this guy highly for landing a low kick on Tatsuro before getting absolutely dog-walked? Come on. I've seen more impressive work from Mateus. So let's get on to the next one. Manuel Torres versus Chris Duncan. I got to go with Manuel Torres, man. Chris Duncan, yeah, he had a big KO in the Contender Series. This is like a big, heavy puncher from the UK. But Manuel Torres is an absolute savage. He's got nasty power. He's very hittable. Chris Duncan is more defensively sound, but Chris Duncan's a little bit of a plotty guy, very low output, and I think that he's going to get uncomfortable when Manuel Torres brings the fight to him. Now, I could see Chris Duncan laying out Manuel Torres. I absolutely could, but I'm looking at Manuel Torres. He's 3-0 in the UFC. I'm sorry, 2-0 in the UFC. He knocked out Nicholas Moto with an elbow and put him to sleep. And Nicholas Moto is a big power puncher too, similar to Chris Duncan. He knocked out Frank Camacho, just took the fight to him and absolutely blew him out of the water, landed a nasty combination on him and put him away. Dude, I'm going to pick him to win this fight. And he's only really lost by submission. I don't think that Chris Duncan's going to sub him, even though Duncan does have some decent grappling. Like, I did pick, what's his name? Omar Morales to beat Chris Duncan. And he out-grappled Omar Morales. But that fight was so slow and so boring. All right? Yanal Ashmuz, that fight was so slow and so boring. And I can't pick an NPC. Sorry. I'm going with Manuel Torres, big power, high output, makes fights. He could make it a war. He could drag this into a war. And I like that from him. And I think his Muay Thai, his low kicks, his elbows, his variety is a whole lot better. And Chris Duncan's going to be out there pitter-patting leg kicks. And the only thing that he's got going for him is a big right hand. And I just trust in Manuel Torres' finishing ability in this fight. Again, I say this all the time, but your ability to impose your will is the biggest difference maker when it comes to like fights outside of the rankings. I'm always going to go with a guy like Manuel Torres. We'll see how Chris Duncan does, but he's just not separating himself from his opposition as much as Manuel. So let's get on to the next fight. Raul Rosas Jr. versus Ricky Turcios. Raul Rosas Jr., I'd be willing to bet my house on it. Okay? Raul Rosas Jr., I'd be willing to bet $1 million if I found it in the woods. I'm tired, dude. Oh my God, these cringy comments on Big Marcel's Instagram, dude. Ricky Turcios is a problem, man. Based on what? Huh? Based on what? Little decisions? Little decision merchant Ricky Turcios? Split decisions? Versus Raul Rosas Jr., who absolutely was dog walking Christian Rodriguez, the one guy to beat him, and he gassed himself out. He learned a lesson. He went Khamzat Chimaev mode in that fight. Learned a lesson, gassed out, and also Christian Rodriguez he's no slouch. He's no slouch. And Raul Rosas has gotten bigger since then. He's put on a lot of muscle. He's moved. Dude, I think he spent a lot of time. I forget the country that he was in. Someplace near Kazakhstan, dude. Someone remind me in the comments. But he went there to wrestle, and he got a lot better. He's coming off of a big KO win over Terrence Mitchell. And yeah, Terrence Mitchell was fighting like a damn fool in that fight. But I'm sorry, man. Ricky Turcios, what's so good about him? He doesn't have power. Okay, he's not all that dangerous. He gets out-grappled in his fights. Like, I was rewatching Ricky Turcios' fight against Kevin Natividad, and the guy was getting absolutely out-grappled. He's not super fast twitch. Like, the only thing he's got going here is he's older than Raul Rosas Jr. I think Raul Rosas is, listen, he's only 19. He's getting a lot better as a wrestler. He's been training with Merab Dvalishvili. He's got a bunch of good training partners around him. I think he's going to absolutely smoke Ricky Turcios and finish him in the first round. If you're picking Ricky Turcios, you're just trying to be Mr. Hardcore. You're trying to be Mr. Pump the Brakes guy. Just because Raul Rosas is 19 years old and that's it. Like, I'm sorry, man. There's absolutely no reason to pick him in this fight. He's not a finisher. He's a split decision merchant. He's a guy that you could be throwing around on the ground, and he's not all that good on the feet. On to the next one. Daniel Zellhuber versus Francisco Prado, the Argentinian Drew Dober lookalike. Very similar build. He's got the power puncher's chance, but he lost to Jamie Mullarkey. And if you have the power puncher's chance in this fight and you're losing to Jamie Mullarkey, who doesn't have the same frame advantage and also isn't the heaviest hitter, I'm sorry, man. I'm not picking you to beat Daniel Zellhuber, who's like a better version of Ignacio Bahamondes, who is a guy that forgot that he had legs in the octagon, but has like a really good frame for the lightweight division. I'm going to go with Daniel Zellhuber to piece up Francisco Prado. He's got a submission game. He's coming off of an anaconda choke submission win over Christos Giagos. He's basically pieced everyone up that he's fought. He has an 8-inch reach advantage in this fight. He has high output. He has the speed advantage, in my opinion, too. This is a pretty easy fight to pick. I'll go with Daniel Zellhuber by a decision, or I don't mind him winning by a second-round KO as well, catching Francisco Prado coming in. On to the co-main event, Yair Rodriguez versus Brian Ortega. I actually picked Brian Ortega going into their first fight, and I was there. This was the only ever event I went to live. It was a very disappointing and anticlimactic main event. But the reason I picked Brian Ortega to win the first fight was because I was thinking, you know what? Like, he's so durable. I think he's going to be able to hang in there. And in a dirty scrap, maybe in the deep waters, he'll find a submission. He'll latch onto something like Paul Craig, the Kraken, just jumping out of nowhere, and maybe gets like a standing guillotine. And we did learn a lot from that fight. We know Ortega can take down Yair. I think everyone that's ever really tried to take down Yair in general has succeeded. But Yair's coming off of that training camp against Alexander Volkanovski. I think Yair has even improved since his fight with Brian Ortega. And let's be honest, Yair was fucking up Ortega on the feet. He made a very quick adjustment in that fight to deal with Ortega's looping punches. He just started going down the middle with straight shots. And as the Weasel says, straight shots beat looping shots. And he was spinning Ortega's head back, fucking him up on the feet. But Ortega took him down. And I actually kind of think that the submission that Yair got was legit. Like, he kind of caused that to happen. I mean, he got an armbar and Ortega tried to escape. And in the process of trying to escape, he had his shoulder pop out. That's legit, man. Now, I don't think that's going to happen again. I think Ortega's going to be a little bit more hip to it. But although Ortega can take Yair down, I just don't think he has the control or the ground and pound to be able to really do a whole lot with it. Now, we know he can get the submission. I mean, he came close to submitting Volk. And most guys would have been tapped out by some shit like that. Let's be honest. It's possible. He's sneaky. He can get you out of nowhere. But as far as him closing the distance, in order to even get a clinch, he's going to take a lot of damage doing that because we know that Yair is a much faster and better striker in this fight. He's going to take a lot of damage getting to the clinch, and when he works his way into a takedown, Ortega's not really this guy that's been able to, secure a takedown and work his way into side control and get in a mount and work from there. He's the out-of-nowhere submission guy. And I just think that Yair, if he gets taken down, is going to be able to scramble up to his feet. I do. And so it'd just be kind of risky to bet on a submission from Brian Ortega, who hasn't submitted anyone in years, even throughout his past, 4 or 5 fights. It's just not happened. So I'm going to pick Yair Rodriguez to get this one done via doctor stoppage. I think that he's going to fuck up Ortega so badly on the feet. I think he's going to bubble up his eye and just cut his lip open. And we're going to see Ortega absorb 150 head strikes, 50 kicks to the body and legs. And I think the referee, I'm sorry, not the ref, the doctor, is going to stop it. Honestly. I mean, Yair outstruck Volk. Even though he got TKO'd, he was outstriking Volkanovski in the second round before the takedown. Volk was shooting for dear life. Even in the third where he got the TKO, Yair was out there sniping him up, He was in there with Max Holloway, out damaging him, forcing Max to shoot takedowns. And that's where Max had his success. I see the success that Max and Volk have with their wrestling and their control and their ground and pound. I don't think Ortega has that ground and pound. I don't think he has the same wrestling control. And on the feet, I don't think he's going to be as competitive as Volk even was. I don't think he's going to be as competitive as Max was. And we've seen him in there. But Yair's gotten even better. Ortega's been out for a year and a half. I think he's going to be slower than ever. Yair's going to be faster than ever. And fighting a guy like Rodriguez, it's like you're taking a pop quiz every 5 seconds. I heard Dan Hardy say that, and it's so true. You don't know what's coming next. He's so unpredictable, and he also has a good chin. I know he got TKO'd. It's not like he got slumped out cold. I think he's going to be hitting Ortega with whatever the heck he wants. Freaking tomahawk elbows, flying scissor kicks, you name it, he's going to be landing it. And I think his takedown defense is going to have been improved a little bit. His jiu-jitsu, he's still a tough guy to deal with. I think it's going to be the wrestlers like Volk, Topuria, even Holloway has some decent wrestling. They're going to give him the biggest issues. Ortega has a chance. I can't count him out completely, but I can't just pick him with a little Kraken out of nowhere submission attempt chance, okay? I think he's going to get minced up. I'm going to go with a doctor stoppage, cumulative damage, and this is going to be it for Ortega, honestly. I'm going with Yair. I also think he's hungrier too. Not that Ortega isn't training, but he's been on the couch. I've kind of questioned his hunger with all the inactivity too over the years, and I think that Yair, now that Volkanovski, the guy that just beat him, is out of the equation, I think he likes his chances at going for another title run. So I'm going to pick him to win this fight. Let's get on to the next one. Brandon Moreno versus Brandon Royval. Easy. I'm going with Royval. I'm picking Brandon Royval to get this one done. The reason why is, listen, I'm joking. I'm going with Brandon Moreno. Royval is going to get beat in a similar way to how he got beat against Pantoja, except the difference in this fight is going to be Brandon Moreno having more success on the feet than Pantoja had, right? Pantoja, he's a guy that like comes in relying on his chin, throwing big meaty hooks, big meaty body kicks, but he doesn't have a lot of output. He just kind of stalks you down and has a serious power advantage, a chin advantage, and he stalks you down until he can get a hold of you and take you to the mat. Moreno is going to have a significant size advantage in this fight against Brandon Royval, which is honestly one of his shortcomings in this division. He's kind of like a guy that you could blow away with a gust of wind. He's got a decent frame advantage over these flyweights, but like we saw in the first fight, I understand this is a rematch, Moreno was able to control him on the ground. Moreno was able to take his back. He was able to get him on the mat. And Royval, like, you know, he's kind of fragile. I'm not going to lie, dude. He's a little bit fragile. And Brandon Moreno's wrestling has improved a lot since then. I know Royval is a good grappler. I know he's dangerous. But at the same time, like, he's a little bit of a pipsqueak. Let's just be honest. And Moreno has gotten a lot bigger throughout his career. We've seen him physically change from his first fight with Figueiredo all the way up until his like third fight with Figgy, where he packed on a lot of muscle. He's much more mature. He's super good at wrestling these days. His output on the feet is going to be able to match Royval too. You know, Royval beat Pantoja in the 5th round. He outstruck him handily. He was ahead in the tit-for-tat striking game against Pantoja, but so was Moreno. And, you know, the issue for Moreno in that fight was that Pantoja rocked him and dropped him. I don't think Royval is going to be able to really do a lot of damage on Moreno unless he finds some crazy man's jumping, spinning technique that Moreno doesn't see. But Moreno's less wild. Like, Moreno's boxing is improved. Yes, he's there to be hit. Yes, he's been in a lot of wars. But as far as like landing some crazy spinning shit on him or some jump flying knee, I just think that his defense these days is going to be fine for that. I think he's going to be able to see those shots coming. I think he's going to be able to go tit for tat with Royval. I think he'll have the power advantage. I think he'll have the better boxing. Royval's a kind of stick and move guy with no sting on his jab, no sting on the basic strikes. And he has, you know, listen, he's a good submission artist. He takes a lot of risks on the ground, but Moreno's a better wrestler. Moreno's got the better ability to control him, and Moreno freaking controlled him last time, and we saw Royval's body give out. So I'm going to go with Brandon Moreno. And I'm going to pick Brandon Moreno to win this fight by decision. I'm going to pick him to win this by decision. I could see Moreno maybe getting a TKO, but I'm going to go with him by decision, man. All right, I trust in Moreno's chances. This is going to be a fun fight. I just see that he will be able to control Royval multiple times in this fight, maybe get a takedown. And I do believe that he will hurt Royval a few times on the feet and just do more damage to him because he has the power advantage. He has the better boxing fundamentals, and I just don't see Royval knocking him out. Listen, Royval needs a finish, and I just think it's really difficult to finish Brandon Moreno. It is. It's extremely difficult. Like, who the fuck has done that recently? Nobody. All right? Brandon Moreno's an absolute dog, and Royval kind of relies on a finish over, like, these top guys. I just think he's a little bit of a pushover when it comes to the grappling wrestling, and I just don't think he's powerful enough to put Moreno away for me to bet on it. He's powerful enough to get a finish. I just can't pick him. I think it's more likely that Moreno does more damage on the feet because he hits harder and he has better boxing fundamentals. He has good kicks. And he has a better tit-for-tat, high-output style than Pantoja did. So, there's that. I'm picking Brandon Moreno by decision. I'm picking Yair Rodriguez by doctor's stoppage. We'll see. We'll see what happens, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. Until next time.